On this James the Bike Guy, we're taking a look at Giant's entry-level all-mountain trail bike. A bike that's got lots of suspension travel, lots of options, and is a great place to get going if you're looking for a real mountain bike to tackle some serious terrain. So in this video, we're going to go into some features and designs about this bike. We'll talk about who's it for, what it's all about, and then of course we'll find out exactly what it weighs. So if this kind of thing is interesting to you, I suggest you sit back, enjoy the video, and let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. The Giant Trance X is Giant's take on an all-mountain trail bike. And by that I mean, this is the kind of bike that you could take to just about any trail system and have a good time. It strikes that balance between having too much suspension travel and a bit too aggressive geometry, to also being a place where it's going to pedal well and it's going to be nimble enough for some of the tighter and more tame trails. And how they do that is they've set it up with some modern geometry, 150 millimeters of travel up front and 135 millimeters of travel through their Maestro suspension out back for a progressive geometry design so that the bike is going to be a good do-it-all. Now, where this falls in the lineup is just above the more entry-level and more trail-oriented stance version of their bikes, and then it's just below their more enduro version called the Rain. And so it strikes this Goldilocks position where it ends up being a good option for somebody looking for a bike to do just about any serious trail work. The frame and suspension on this Trance X is kind of where this is going to shine, especially in the Trance X 3. So the 3 is the entry-level version of this bike, but it runs the same frame and geometry as the higher-level versions of the Trance X. So the quick hits for this bike, it's going to come stock with 150 millimeter front suspension, which is going to be the max suspension that you can put in the front end. And then out back, it's going to be running the Maestro suspension design from Giant. This is a pretty neat suspension design with a few different pivots that are going to allow you to have very progressive suspension feel, especially considering this is running a long stroke shock. And it's going to have 135 millimeters out back pairing with that 150 so that the bike's going to be nice and slack in geometry but have good pedaling performance. The frame itself is made out of their ALUXX aluminum. This is a hydroformed shaped tubing frame. You can see that it's got some pretty cool shapes to it. It's internally cable routed. It runs an 1.125 to 1.5 tapered steerer going down to where the crankset attaches to the bike is of course going to be a press fit bottom bracket. And then you've got this full aluminum rear swing arm. And the neat thing with this is of course you're running a Boost 12 by 148 rear through axle to go along with 15 by 110 front through axle. But the suspension in the back, that Maestro design we were talking about, runs something called a flip chip. There's a high and a low position for the flip chip. So this piece there, that oval, you can flip around and that's going to change the position that the bike's in. Right now it's in the lowest or the slackest position. So right now it's got a 66.5 degree head tube angle, a 77.2 degree seat tube angle, and a bottom bracket drop of 30 millimeters. Now, if you go ahead and you flip that over, it steepens the head tube to 66.2, steepens the seat tube to 77.9, and then it brings the bottom bracket height all the way up by 10 millimeters to 40 millimeters. And bottom bracket drop is measured from axle to axle and how far down the bottom bracket is. Why this number matters is that's going to lower the center of gravity while you're riding, but it's also going to introduce the chance if it's too low that your pedals could strike against rocks and things like that. And this is a place where that flip chip is pretty interesting because as you flip it to the higher position, it's going to allow the bike to have much more bottom bracket height, but it's also going to steepen the leverage curve on the shock so that it's going to feel a little bit snappier and stiffer. Now, a few last things to talk about this frame before we go. It's going to have a max tire clearance of 2.5 inches. And then we also are running ISCG tabs around the press fit bottom bracket. I do also like how this Fox Float DPS shock is a trunnion mount, and they do that so that they can run a longer stroke on the shock. So the shock itself has 185 overall millimeters of length and 55 millimeters of stroke, which is quite long, and that's how you're going to get a lot of that progressivity, all because this trunnion allows them to bolt right into the top of the shock and not have to add additional length. Now that 150 millimeter fork that's up front, this is the RockShox 35 Gold. This is a 35 millimeter stanchion fork, so you've got nice thick stanchions on it. It'll then have compression adjust with detents, so little clicks you can see there that allow it to go from all the way open to locked out so that you can control the front end of the suspension. And additionally, you also have air adjustment. So underneath this cap is a nozzle to be able to adjust the air pressure so that you can dial in the suspension to your weight and riding style. I should have mentioned that's also in the rear end of the bike on that Fox Float DPS as well. So in package, frame and shock setup, pretty good for a lot of different riding types. The cockpit of the bike is going to be all Giant. So here we've got the Giant Contact TR35 bar. This is a very wide 780 millimeter wide bar with a 35 millimeter bar clamp, and then it's going to have a rise of about 20 millimeters. Now, of course, to go along with that is a Giant Contact 35 millimeter stem. This is the SL Lite version. And then out back, you've got the Giant Romero saddle on a Giant contact switch dropper. So this dropper is a 30.9 dropper. And then what's really neat about it is it's going to be controlled using this 1x style lever. So you can see here, this almost looks like a shifter, very much like the shifter over there. So just press it down with the thumb, and that's going to raise the seat post, or when you press down with your body weight on it, drop the seat post back down. The Trance X3 is going to be running through a 12-speed Eagle group set. This is the more basic version from SRAM called the SX Eagle. So it's going to have a 12-speed rear derailleur that's operating through this super wide range 11 to 50 tooth cassette. So you're going to have a huge amount of gear range, and it allows them to run forward to the SX crankset. This SX crankset is an aluminum crankset, of course, running their dub bottom bracket system. And then you can see now that it's got a narrow wide Eagle chainring, and you can see they alternate between narrow and wide to help with chain retention, which allows the bike, along with its clutch on the rear derailleur, to keep the chain from falling off with only a single ring up front. Now, we did say earlier it's got ISCG mounts behind here, so you could put a chain guide or a bash guard, all great things to add in the future. And a nice little detail on the bike is this rubberized chain guard with little knobs or ridges, you might call it, so that when the chain does come down, it doesn't hit flat, which is going to help keep the drivetrain much more quiet. Wheels and tires on the bike are very solid. Here we've got the Giant AM29 rims. Super wide tubeless ready rim, and in fact it's coming out of the box tubeless ready, so it's all set up. And then you've got the Maxxis DHF front tire. This is a 29 by 2.5 super aggressive front tire, also tubeless ready. And out back they swap it out for the Dissector. It's a good fast rolling rear tire that still offers some super climbing grip, and I love to see these Maxxis name brand tires on the Giant Trance, as it's an upgrade that's already done right out of the box. The actual weight of the Giant Trance X3 is going to come in and weigh 31.26 pounds. Thanks for watching this video on the Giant Trance X3. Go ahead and let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. While you're at it, be sure to hit a thumbs up button letting me know you enjoyed the video, and don't forget to click subscribe so that way you can see more videos like this in the future.